Hello and welcome to This Complex Life. This episode has a bit of a little ears warning, so if you've got some little ears around, perhaps listen to this at a late date. It contains some adult-only material and some explicit content. Sexting, polyamory, gender identity, sexuality, porn, consent. The world of sex and sexual health is full of things that we might not have talked about before. I know when I was growing up, we didn't talk about any of these things. Sex was very much a biological thing that you learnt about, how babies are made, and that was pretty much it. I'm pretty sure we even had one sex education class with our school reverend, right? I mean, of all people to do the class. There was no conversation beyond that. This is one of the questions I get a lot from parents. How to talk to kids about sex. And I'm going to dive into some of the common questions that I get from folks. So, starting off, what age should I be talking to my child about sex? And how much information is appropriate for their age? Now, my specialty is mostly around working with adolescents. So I'm going to spend most of my time talking about what to do and what to say for them. There are some key things here that I find people struggle with. And some think they're protecting their kids by not talking to them honestly about sex. And I hate to break it to you, but that's just not the case. We need to be talking about it. And if you're asking when, it's from now. It's from whenever you're listening to this, whatever age they're at, now. Right now is the right age to start having conversations around sexuality, sex, and consent. And it's not just about biology and mechanics. Yes, there's the mechanics of sex. There's what goes where and how. And there's safety and STDs and STIs and all of that stuff that you do want to talk about. But you also want to talk about what sex can mean, what it can offer, how people can connect with it, and how sex can look very different for different folks with different bodies, different abilities, different desires, different wants, needs, etc. And we want to be really careful here that we're not yucking someone's yum. So we're not judgmental about other people's sexual preferences and what they like and what they don't like. And even though you might not say that directly, if they overhear you kind of talking about that stuff, it can leave an impact. So you need to talk about all of it at an age-appropriate way. From early education, we start with basic concepts like body parts, privacy in early childhood, and using the correct names for body parts, and explain that some parts are private. You build on those gradually. You can add more detail. You can focus on basics of sort of where babies come from, and older children can learn about puberty, consent, and safe sex. So you start to build that up over time. Around maybe 7 or 8, you're talking about gender identity, different family profiles. Kids might start to learn a bit more about puberty and how their body might change, what's going on for different types of bodies. And then we slowly start building from there. So kids learning then about consent, about healthy relationships, crushes, dating, all of that kind of stuff. And then as we get to those tween years, by about 12, they should start to know the basics of everything. Why people have sex, that they don't have to if they don't want to, that sex is normal, it's a healthy part of life. These conversations should be around what sex is, not how to do it. And then alongside that is the need for appropriate information around sex and their bodies. And this, here is a really important part to advocate for and teach them the importance of consent and body boundaries. So how do you talk about consent? It starts at home and it starts from when they're young. So if you've got little ones, you have a chance to maybe do this different. But common consent violations parents can make is maybe tickling past the point of consent, being forced to give or share affection, or any time a no is not respected. And then we move into teenage relationships. So in talking to teens around consent, we need to define consent clearly. And some of these things you might be listening to and thinking, I don't even know how to do these. So go and learn how. Read some books, watch some videos, get some reputable information so that you can feel comfortable with the language so that you can then share it with them. So start off by explaining consent. Make sure that they understand that it means agreeing to something willingly and enthusiastically. It's about mutual agreement without any pressure, manipulation, or fear. Manipulation can also be someone sulking or being moody or withdrawing from them. They're still manipulating them. So letting them know what that looks like. You might need to even unpack what manipulation looks like, what it means. Ask them questions. Maybe say, when I say without manipulation, what does that mean to you? And they say, oh, I don't know. Then you can say, oh, well, what if it's this? What's that? What would it look like? So unpack those things. Take it slow. Consent also has to be affirmative and ongoing. It's not about just saying yes or no once. It's an ongoing conversation. Both people should feel comfortable at every stage. No means no, and yes means yes. But doesn't mean that yes is always a hard yes or it can't be taken away. So make it clear that if someone isn't sure and doesn't respond or says no at any point, it means consent hasn't been given. And we need to be looking at that enthusiastic consent. So someone might shrug and say, oh, okay, because they're scared or they're overwhelmed. That doesn't give you the green light. Discuss the importance of respect and boundaries. Respecting personal boundaries is so important. So teach them about that, how everyone has the right to set their own boundaries regarding physical touch, affection, intimacy. And those boundaries must be respected at all time. That can be hard for some families who might force their children to kiss a grandparent or hug an auntie or uncle or do those things. If that has not been respected for them growing up, this might be a really tricky one. So start from young and let them know that their body autonomy is respected, that nobody's going to touch them without their consent, without them wanting to. Emphasize that pressuring someone into doing something they're uncomfortable with is never acceptable, and a healthy relationship involves mutual respect and understanding. And encourage them to check in regularly, to check with their partner how they're feeling and how to listen actively to their responses. And checking in helps them ensure that both people are safe and respected. It's not just enough to sort of reel these off as a kind of a checklist. Sometimes we need to know examples of how to say it or how to phrase it. So if we're having a conversation around checking in regularly, for example, it might be saying, how might you do that? Or here are a couple of sentences that I might use. Do any of them feel okay for you? So it's actually giving them some language or some kind of scripts that they can fall back on and they can kind of work with and make it their own. We want to talk about consent in different contexts. So this can be beyond sexual activity, that consent is important in many situations, sharing personal information, physical affection, and different social media interactions. And you can talk about that and boundaries as well. And digital consent. So talking about the importance of getting consent before sharing or posting photos or private conversations. Just like in person, respecting someone's digital boundaries is also really important. And lead by example. This one is one of the things that I talk about in all of my episodes around working with teens or having teens or parenting. It's leading by example. So they can't be what they can't see. So show your teen what respect looks like, what good communication looks like, what consent looks like in everyday interactions. They learn a lot by observing adults' behavior. You can discuss how it's portrayed in media, so how consent is portrayed in movies, in TV shows and online, and use these as opportunities to discuss what's healthy, what a healthy relationship can look like or should look like, and encourage empathy. So help them understand the importance of considering another person's feelings and encourage them to think about how they would want to be treated in that situation. Not when they've come to you to talk about a problem. If you're empathizing with the other person or saying, well, how do you think it made that person feel? You've missed validating their experience. And I've got an episode a little while back that you can check out around that called Why My Teen Listened to Me. So when we're talking about helping them understand the other person's perspective, it's when we're nutting things out or brainstorming or kind of observing maybe characters in a TV show and you're looking at what might the other person be feeling in that situation. So how do I start a conversation about sex with my child without making it awkward? Well, they might not know it's awkward to talk about sex unless you make it awkward. So if you've never had these conversations before and now you've got a 15-year-old and you listen to this and you're like, oh crap, Marie said I should talk to them now. Yeah, they might find it a bit awkward because it has been awkward in your family. What you don't talk about shows them what's appropriate or not appropriate to talk about. So if you've never talked about it, if you don't mention it, yeah, that's going to be awkward. So that's going to be the reality. It's not their job to ask questions about sex. It's the parent's job to make that information available and to make it accessible and to talk about it in a way that feels comfortable from whatever age they're at. So talking about topics relating to sex, it can be tricky, it can be difficult, it can be very triggering for adults, and it can actually bring up the discomfort that you might have felt when your parents were talking to you, or when a teacher was talking to you. It might bring up all sorts of things. So if that is happening for you, get some support around that so that you can have these conversations in a way that feels safe and comfortable for all the people involved. Normalize conversations around bodies, relationships, and boundaries from a young age. This can help them set that stage for more specific talks about sex. Use everyday moments, like when a topic comes up on TV or during everyday activities, to introduce a subject in a natural way. So you can sprinkle in language that feels appropriate for those different situations. Keep in mind to stay calm and open, approach the conversation in a non-judgmental tone, and let them know it's okay to ask questions and that you're there to support them. Don't jump in with problem solving, don't jump in to try and fix things, and don't jump in to criticize or judge or say something like, how dare you, or you're way too young for that, or some big explosion. You don't want them to be running away from you when something happens. You want them to come to you, to have that trusting relationship there. Be honest and age appropriate. Answer questions honestly, but keep the information appropriate to their age and the developmental stage. It's okay to say, we can talk more about that when you're older. It's also okay to say, that's a really good question and you've caught me a little off guard. Can we make a time to talk about it so I can just make sure that I've got all my thoughts in order? Or I've actually been thinking about having a conversation with you about this, and there's a few things that I want to make sure I talk to you about. Can we talk about this later? And pick a time. You can go do some of your research. Maybe you can take some dot points on your phone. That's fine. I think that role model is a really good authenticity and a vulnerability to say, hey, I don't know everything right now and you've caught me off guard and I'm not going to be my best self. But if you do need to go research some stuff or have some things ready, I think that shows you care a lot. How lovely is that you care enough that you pause the conversation so you can center yourself, calm yourself, and then you go find the information you need. You might have that ready. Don't print out like booklets and that'll make it really awkward, but you might have some notes on your phone if it helps you kind of keep track, or some kind of dot points or something. I think that's totally fine, and talk about why you're doing that, because this is an important topic. I don't want to get it wrong. My parents maybe messed it up, or I didn't learn about this in school, and I want to make sure that I cover a few things that are actually really important to me that I'd like you to know about. And I'm just going to read off, the notes that I've got with me so that I can cover everything. Like, just be honest and admit this is kind of awkward. We haven't had these conversations before, or I'm actually really proud of you for asking and thank you so much for trusting me. So affirm their curiosity, be prepared, go prepare if you need to. You'll be fine. You'll get through this. It'll be okay. How do I address questions about gender identity and sexual orientation in an inclusive and supportive way? So this is a really common one. We want to stop showing judgment about others. So even if you're saying you're not judgmental for them, if they came home and said that they've got a crush on someone of the same sex or gender, or something like that, it's not enough to say, well, I wouldn't judge you. A lot of the queer folk that I work with have these memories of their parents commenting on other people outside of the family, of commenting on celebrities, on sportsmen, on sportswomen, on other people, making these comments using words as insults, and that has stuck in their mind, and it's been part of their pain or their kind of emotional wounds. And for some people, it meant for them for a long time, they didn't feel that they could talk about their sexuality or their gender because they had heard people in their lives respond negatively to other people, even teachers. If a child yells out something like faggot from the back of the classroom and the teacher just kind of rolls their eyes like, come on, dude, again, doesn't say anything and just keeps going. For a kid in the class who might be questioning their sexuality, they might see that as, oh, this is not safe because nobody held that person accountable for saying something so hurtful. So what you say about other people is very, very important. Affirm diversity. Explain that people can love and identify in many different ways and that all identities and orientations deserve respect and acceptance. Use inclusive language when talking about relationships, gender neutral terms, discuss a range of identities and orientations and not just heterosexual and cisgendered norms. If you are uncomfortable with some of that language, you don't know what it means, there are some really great resources out there that you can find that can help you understand what they mean. And be open to learning. If your child asks something that you're unsure about, it's okay to say, let's find out together. That's actually a really good question. It can show that learning is a lifelong process. All right, you're hanging in there? We've got 2 more questions to go about this fun and interesting topic. So what should I do if my child seems embarrassed or unwilling to talk about sex? Because that's a pretty high probability, right? I think that that's going to happen. Respect their feelings. Acknowledge that talking about sex can be awkward, it can feel embarrassing, and reassure them it's normal to feel that way. Let them know that they can come to you with questions anytime and that you'll support them and not judge them. And offer alternatives. If direct conversations are difficult, it's still helpful to mention the topics, because by you saying, hey, I want to have a chat about sex or consent or something like that, and they're like, oh, ick, yuck, no. You've still let them know that that's a topic that is okay to talk about. You've still normalized that. So that's still a good thing. But redirect them to books or trusted websites or things that they can explore on their own. Or maybe there is a sibling or a relative or cousin or someone that they can talk to if they find that more comfortable. And just let them know that you'll answer questions about things whenever they're ready. What you don't say or don't talk about sends a message about what's okay or not okay to talk about. So if you never mention it, then it implies that it's not a thing that they can talk to you about. So try to be honest, try to be considered, respect their privacy and respect their desire to have some space with not talking about that. But if you start this early enough, the conversation should kind of naturally evolve and progress, that this won't be such a big deal. And the last one is, how do I ensure that the information they get is accurate? Look, you want to be the person that they run to, not from. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but try and be the primary source. If you start conversations early, they know that they can come to you with questions, and this can help establish you as a trusted source of information. You want to provide accurate information, because if you say something that's completely inaccurate and they find something that contradicts that, it kind of pulls into question some of the other things. And we see that a lot with drug and alcohol and things like that. If someone's like, if you try that once, you're going to explode or something ridiculous, and they see it happen, they see a friend try it and nothing happens, like, oh, I wonder what other things I've been lied to about. So reputable stuff. Discuss media. Discuss how to evaluate information that they find online, how things that they see and hear from peers isn't accurate, that porn is not an accurate representation. You might not need to have an entire conversation around material, pornographic material, editing, video editing of images, even just sexualized images. So that can go into a whole conversation about body image. I'm not going to talk about that at the moment. But if it's something you're interested in, let me know and I'll do an episode on it. And stay engaged. Regularly check in with them about what they're learning in school, what they're learning from friends, and this can give you a chance to correct any misinformation. I hope that's been a helpful episode for you. This whole series is around sex and relationships and consent, and so there's a few other juicy episodes coming up around this topic. And if you've got a question that you want answered on the show, send me an email or drop me a voice memo and I will try and get around to answering it. Thank you for listening. To keep the conversation going, head on over to Instagram or LinkedIn and follow me. If you'd like to keep updated with episodes and other interesting things happening in mental health, join my weekly This Complex Life newsletter, where I'll share tools, tips and insight. There's a link in the show notes. Got a question you want answered? Shoot me an email or a DM. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a rating and a review. It helps other people find the podcast.